So my name is Katie Sweetman. I'm an astrologer here in Brooklyn, New York, and we are looking at the astrology of 2021, this big picture overview of what this year means for you, and of course, the finer points on what it means for each sign of the zodiac. So as I record this is January 23rd, 2021. Yeah, we were like already a few weeks into the new year, already starting to feel this new astrology that's coming in 2021. Again, my name is Katie Sweetman. I'm an astrologer and psychic medium here in Brooklyn, New York. And I know some of you on this call right now are my clients, or you've been on other webinars, and I'm really deeply grateful for you being part of my work and supporting my work, whether it's again through the webinars or some of you watch my Facebook Lives, you're part of my mailing list. I've been doing Empowering Astrology since 2010. It's when I first got this idea to share my perspective on astrology. And I have a very holistic view of astrology. You know, everything that I'm sharing today, of course, is a container for our experiences this year, but do not forget that you are you, that you are the other part to all of this. And how do you make choices that interface with this time? Because astrology is just time. And how do you kind of create the life that is most in alignment for you, most in alignment for your sign? Hang on, I'm just adding a couple more people to the live webinar. Quick housekeeping again for those that are doing the live webinar. If you are just joining now, you can put your questions into the comments box as we move along. I will not answer questions until the end of each section of the presentation, and we will of course do Q&A at the end of the webinar. So here's just a quick agenda. I'm Saturn and Virgo. I don't know if that means anything to you all, but I like to kind of keep things nice and tidy. So of course, we're going to see how 2021 is actually part of a bigger story, how we cannot look at 2021 as a standalone year and how it compares to 2020. And anytime you sit down and look at the astrology for the year, you have to look at the major players: Saturn, eclipses, major configurations of the planets. Like, those are the big drivers for everyone for the year, and it's how you can start to form an idea of what is going to happen for each sign overall. One of the major factors, or one of the major players this year, is something called Saturn square Uranus, which we will of course talk about. It's what's called a 90-degree angle between Saturn and Uranus, and how that is sort of bringing forward a story from 2018 into kind of more, we have to deal with it more in 2021. And then we have to look at the eclipses. The eclipses are showing where the sort of the major movement is happening this year, and how in 2021, we start to get a preview of a new eclipse story towards the end of the year. And then of course, a sign by sign overview. So here's how I'm looking at things. We've been in a vortex of change and evolution for a few years now, and you could argue that this has actually been a decade worth. And I think every year, everybody asks me, is it going to get better, Katie? Things going to go back to normal? And I'm not trying to sound like a pessimist. I think I'm just trying to be a realist, is that we are in a time of change. We are in a time where everything has to evolve. All you have to do is to see how things progress. The story of change and evolution progresses each year. 2021 is not going to be easier. It's not going to be better. It's just going to be different. It's a different story around evolution and change. And I think you all are probably here because you have seen change in your life on some level over the past couple of years in particular, and it's likely been profound. Profound, it could be something on the level of career, it could be something on the level of the self, meaning you have changed. You're not the same person you were 2 years ago. And maybe you think, well, why? Why now? Well, that's It's $1 million question. I can't answer why on a bigger level. I just know that it is now. And each year, whether it's 2020, 2021, 2022, so forth, is going to keep asking us to do the work. And I think for each and every one of us, the more that we do the work, the more that we have a really powerful year. It's the same reason why in 2020 was not a bad year for everybody. Was a difficult year? Absolutely. But I've had a lot of conversations with people where they're like, you know what, I've looked back and I have a lot to be grateful for, but it was actually a really good year in a weird way. And I think that if you use this energy for what its highest potential is, it can be a good year. Not an easy year, but a powerful year. One of the factors in the astrology this year is a lot of things are pointing towards Aquarius. Aquarius is one of the last signs of the zodiac. It's not talking about life on a personal level. It's talking about life on a global level, which means that the work that we're doing, and maybe you're thinking, well, I'm not an Aquarius. Well, here's the quick rundown of things is that you are all 12 signs. All 12 signs of the zodiac are somewhere within you. They're somewhere in your chart. So you might not be an Aquarius, but Aquarius is a major part of your chart. It could be career, it could be relationships, it could be how you communicate and use your voice. But that's a personal level, but nevertheless, on a collective level, we now all have to start looking outward. Aquarius is a sign that talks about what unites us and what divides us. Aquarius is the collective, it's humanity, it's society, it's systems and networks, it's science and technology. Looks like my doorman is buzzing my buzzer right now. Sorry about that. So when we get to each sign of the zodiac or even each planet, we have to look at both sides of things, meaning every sign of the zodiac has two sides. It has the side that uplifts, empowers, and creates, and it has the other side that disconnects, that destroys. So there's two sides of Aquarius. There's a side of connection, humanity, support, the systems are in balance, things are equitable and fair, and then there's the other side. We're going to see this polarity in 2021. And I think when we start to get to the end of the zodiac, we see the divide even more. Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, the divide between the highest side of Pisces, for example, which is saintliness and these beautiful acts of service and compassion, and then the other side, which is loss or addiction or being completely disconnected on a profound spiritual way. As I mentioned, Aquarius does cover science and technology, and as you can imagine, and I know this is actually playing out in the world right now, science and technology are going to be a big factor in the astrology of 2021. It's possible that we see major scientific breakthroughs. Why? Saturn's in Aquarius right now. Jupiter's in Aquarius right now. It's possible that we have to create new systems and networks or new systems in order to create health. And certainly we're seeing this with the pandemic and coronavirus. A little fun fact, Saturn is where it is in the sky right now is approximately where it was when the internet was created as we know it in 1991. So the internet is going to the internet's having a Saturn return. Maybe that's a little bit of a intermediate point, but we're probably going to see something about the internet going to be a big focus this year. And certainly we're all on Zoom right now. We're all doing things remotely. So there's probably going to be new systems or new apps or new technologies to help us be in this new world that we're living in. The other thing is ideas and information. The lunar nodes right now are in Gemini and Sagittarius. So that means these are two signs that are about ideas, learning, education, travel. Gemini needs new ideas, new perspectives, new information, but that's where the North Node is. The South Node, by the way, if you're new to this facet of astrology, the lunar nodes are not planets, they are points in the sky. And wherever they are, talk to where the eclipses are happening. So if we have a North Node in Gemini right now, it means we are going to have eclipses in Gemini. South Node is in Sagittarius. We are going to have eclipses in Sagittarius. The lunar nodes are always opposite one another. They're sort of this collective compass point that we're all pointing towards over a coming year or a coming 18 months. So since 2020, when the nodes shift, I think it was May of 2020, they're now pointing towards Gemini. But they're also, the South Node is in Sagittarius. And the South Node in Sagittarius means that we have to collectively work on our karma around what do we believe in? What's truth? What do we put our faith in? What's wisdom? And also travel. Travel is such a huge theme right now. We can't travel, or travel is restricted in some way. And as I was saying, the South Node is in Sagittarius right now. So we are really digging into these deeper themes around truth and meaning. So this is sort of a broader overview of the astrology of 2021. Of course, we'll get down into the individual pieces and what it means for each sign of the zodiac. The other thing that I've been really stressing to my clients is that in 2021, a bigger story comes to a head. Now, this is a story that began in 2018, 2019. We'll talk about it a little bit more in a moment. And that story, it's as if we have one foot in a new life, but we have one foot in old life. And as you can imagine, if you've got one foot kind of going this way, you have one foot going the other way, there's going to be a tension. There's going to be a divide. And how do we start to resolve, as best we can, the split? Because there's a new life that's opened up for us, and probably for everybody on this call, you already know what that new life is, or you already feel the sense of this new life, or maybe you're stuck. We'll find out in the Q&A. But then you're feeling this old life that's still pulling at you. So how do you start to move? Or do you build a bridge? Or do you completely jump? So we'll talk about that in a few moments. So part 2, 2020 versus 2021. So 2020 rocked our world. Why? There was some major astrology that was going on in 2020, and there was a bunch of planets that were concentrated in the sign of Capricorn. Capricorn is the world. It's structures, it's government, it's power, it's manifestation. And we saw Saturn was in Capricorn 2018, 2019, 2020, which said that we were all working on Capricorn themes. Getting our lives more stable, but you're thinking that's not what happened in 2020. My life did not become more stable. Getting our lives more stable, creating new structures, new orders, new setting boundaries, growing up, growing older, getting wiser, all Capricorn themes. But here's the wild card, maybe not so wild, but Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008. And Pluto is like the demolition guy. Pluto's like the plumber. Pluto's ripping out the walls and down to the studs. It's getting into the pipes and showing you what's there. It's a deep and profound work that we've been all doing for the last 13 years, even if we haven't quite, connected the dots and seen what's been going on in the background. And certainly if you're a client of mine, we've had this conversation. So here came Saturn, came into Capricorn in 2018, 2019, and then in the beginning of 2020, Saturn and Pluto came together in the sky for the first time in 40 years. And the thing is that the last time they were together was 1982, but they were together in an air sign. Air signs about relationships and connections and systems. It was in Libra in 1982. But The last time they were together in Capricorn was actually 1518. There was a lot of seismic shifts. I mean, this is a very European perspective. I need to kind of investigate more of the world history, but there was a lot of seismic shifts that were starting to happen in the early 1500s, at least in Europe, and the systems and power structures. Like I said, Capricorn is the world. It's the power structure of our lives, the power structure of our world, its order. And then here came Saturn and Pluto. So I was calling it the wrecking ball at the time. And I think people thought I was being a little overly dramatic, but they came together, and that was in January. And I was like, okay, well, I was kind of expecting a little bit more dramatic flair between these two planets. And then nothing kind of happened, but we had that delayed reaction. It took until March when we started to see big changes happening in our world. It's because I think Mars had gone into Capricorn as well, if I remember correctly. So I think in some way that 2020 cleared a path for each and every one of you. And I think part of 2021 is how do we start to put something new in its place? What are the new power structures? What's the new grounding that we have in our life? What are the new structures that we're building? Because we can't go back to the world that we had at the beginning of 2020. It doesn't exist anymore. We don't exist. That version of ourselves doesn't exist anymore. So I think 2021 is really pushing us to kind of step into whatever that new thing, that new self, that new life. And then maybe that there's been a little bit of a tension and a divide. At this point in the story, now Saturn's out of Capricorn. It's in Aquarius. Jupiter is in Aquarius too. So there's been a major time shift since 2020. Both Saturn and Jupiter went into Aquarius in December of 2020. So I mean, it's last month as I record this. It feels like another lifetime at this point. So there's going to be a new story that's coming in 2021, but we have to understand what has the story been so far, because even though it's a new story, it very much has its roots in a story that began a decade ago. So something that I said before is that this new story that began in 2018, 2019, and all you have to do is go back and look what started to change profoundly 2-3 years ago, and how maybe that's pulling you in one direction, and how do you again resolve, integrate, or address that divide. So let's look at the major players. What are the bigger factors at play this year? So if any of you have been listening to my work, I think I've developed a little bit of a reputation for being super into Saturn. So I love Saturn because Saturn is the master timekeeper. It's a planet that you can really make evident. I can point it out in people's charts. I can start to tell the story of your Saturn and point it out where it is in the sky right now. And people are like, oh yeah, that's definitely happening. So Saturn, if you imagine astrology is just like a clock. Astrology is just a way to tell time. It's about telling metaphoric time. So if Saturn is a hand on the clock, now it's pointing towards a new sign, as I said, as of December of 2020. So Saturn actually dipped into Aquarius, just side note, March 21st of 2020 until July 1st of 2020. And that was our sign. And usually when I ask people, I say, what was going on in March? And they're saying, well, COVID, coronavirus. I'm like, okay, what else? Because we all started to get a preview of a new time, a new life, new focus from March until July. But Saturn went back out, it went back into Capricorn, and then on December 17th of 2020, it's back into Aquarius, a sign that it hasn't been in since 1991 to, I believe it was January 1994. Also, Jupiter is in, looking at Jupiter, Jupiter is also a major player. Jupiter kind of has a different flavor than Saturn. Saturn's very structured and organized and sort of talking about how things are unfolding and the rhythm at which things are unfolding. But we also have to look at where Jupiter is, because Jupiter reveals areas of growth and expansion. Where are things sort of opening up for us? And in 2020, Jupiter was in Capricorn, so Jupiter didn't quite have a chance to do what it normally does, which is to grow and expand. In a more traditional way of looking at astrology, Jupiter is in its fall in Capricorn, which means it can't do its best work in Capricorn. What it did was it grew and expanded Saturn and Pluto, meaning whatever all that really intense energy that was like, almost like I said, a wrecking ball at the structures of our lives, the structures of the world. And then Jupiter was like, let's make it bigger. So Jupiter is now in Aquarius. It went into Aquarius a couple days after Saturn went into Aquarius on December 19th. This year, Jupiter will go back and forth between Aquarius and Pisces. We'll actually have a dip into Pisces from, I think it's like May 25th, from May until the end of July. Jupiter in Aquarius tells us the growth is happening not just in a certain part of our life, but Jupiter's in a sign of ideals, information. Aquarius is very intellectual. It's very political. It's about society, humanity, social causes, social justice, equity. So Jupiter is a planet about law. So we're really going to, from a collective level, look at our laws, look at the equity of our laws, look at the system and networks and how our laws can help create new systems and new networks. But in Pisces, Jupiter has a little bit more of a spiritual side. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. It's about reconnecting back to source, going back home. Jupiter in Pisces is about finding inner truth and inner meaning. Pisces is a water sign. Aquarius, the sign before, is an air sign. Air signs is about analysis, ideas, the mind. But in Pisces, it's about intuition and feeling. It's very subjective to Aquarius's objective. Just a little side note, and sometimes this has, or at least has come up in the past few weeks, because there's been some chatter online about how we're now officially in the age of Aquarius. I can't confirm or deny that. I think there's a lot of debate on when the age of Aquarius started, or if it has started already. Some people say it started in the 60s or earlier. But something that we had on December 21st of 2020 was a once in a 20-year alignment of Jupiter and Saturn. But the thing that made this different is that now the conjunctions going forward for the next 200 years are going to be in air signs. So there is some sort of, we're at the beginning of some sort of greater shift right now. And it's going to point, and the thing about what's called the Great Conjunction is that it unfolds over a 20-year period. So it's hard, I just say this in case some of you know this point already in astrology. It's going to be hard to see how this is going to unfold in 2021. It's one of those things when you go back and you look, or maybe 10 years from now, when we have a little bit more perspective, we'll see exactly what was seeded during this Great Conjunction in December of 2020. The other thing we have to look at in terms of major players are eclipses. Eclipses, they are major punctuations to the time of the year. They happen every 6 months. And when they do happen, we know for absolute certain that there's going to be a change. Now, for the most part in 2021, the eclipses are in Gemini and Sagittarius, which means that it's continuing a story that began in 2020. I said for the most part, because at the end of this year, we have our first eclipse in Taurus, a completely different eclipse cycle than Gemini and Sagittarius. But we know that come the May, June of 2021, because we'll have eclipses in May and June 2021, and then November, December of 2021, that these are going to be major times of punctuation, new beginning, changes in directions, tension, both personal and collective, to look forward to throughout this year. So like I said, eclipses are one of the major players. The other thing I hinted at is that we have to look to see if there's any major configurations that are playing out in the sky. That's going to tell us another level of what the astrology is on a bigger level this year. And this year we have a square between Saturn and Uranus, which brings me to part 4, Saturn square Uranus. So in 2021, Saturn is going to make 3 squares to Uranus in Taurus. We have to go back and remember that Uranus first entered Taurus in May. It was like May 15th of 2018, dips back out in November, and it went back in March of 2019. It was March 6th of 2019. For those who are a little bit of history nerds, that's a big deal. When Uranus changes signs, it's a big deal because it doesn't happen very often. It's every 7 years. And the last time Uranus was in Taurus was 1930s to 1940s, the very beginning of the 1940s. I think it was like 1933, it went into Taurus. So obviously nobody on this call was alive then. I mean, well, it seems pretty obvious, but it means that Uranus hasn't been in this part of the sky in 80 years, which means it has not been in a certain part of your chart ever. Uranus talks about reinventions and awakenings. It says that that part of your life, whatever Taurus is, now has to be completely as it should be. Maybe there's a better way to put that. Uranus doesn't like where we play small, where we hold back, where we try to be somebody that we're not, where we try to fit ourselves into something that doesn't fit us. So that you're going to see wherever that part of your chart is, that's an area that you've been seeing major reinventions since 2019, 2019. So as I was saying, Uranus shakes things up, it awakens, it liberates, it frees us. You know, I always say to people, like, Uranus actually is trying to throw us a bone. Uranus is actually trying to save us from ourselves. And the example that I often give is, if you're a lawyer or whatever profession, because your parents were that profession and their parents were that profession, then, and you're not really meant to be that thing. Maybe you want to be a painter or you want to be a massage therapist. I don't know what. Here comes Uranus. And Uranus is like, this is not who you are at all. What are you doing? They call Uranus the coming out planet. So there's some part of our life that has to be completely as it's supposed to be. And if it's not, that's where you see these really strong Uranian shifts and awakenings. And sometimes it feels very chaotic, but it is trying to liberate us from ourselves. On the other hand, Saturn's now in Aquarius. If you know your astrology, Aquarius are what are called Aquarius and Saturn are 90 degrees from each other. They are 2 signs that form what's called the fixed cross. So the fixed signs are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. So you have these 2 signs that form part of the cross. You have, of course, Scorpio and Leo, but these are what are called square to each other. And they're fixed signs. Fixed signs is meant to kind of fix things. It's more of a stubborn energy, but it's meant to preserve life and to hold life and to keep things grounded and rooted. Maybe if you're Taurus, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's other signs, there's mutable signs. They kind of go with the flow. They're meant to kind of bend and move and kind of prepare us for new beginnings. And there's cardinal signs. These align with the 4 directions and the 4 seasons. Cardinal signs are about new beginnings, but there's a lot of things this year in 2021 that's happening in fixed signs. So we're seeing things kind of, there's a tension between the things that are not supposed to move. They're supposed to stay fixed, but they have to. So how do we resolve this tension? So Saturn's its initiative is to create order and structure. But then you have Uranus that's trying to awaken and to shake up and to liberate us from ourselves. So you can see that these are two very dynamically different energies. They both serve their own purpose. And it's actually in the first 5 years of your 40s, if you're that old or you were that old, where we actually have what's called, these are the classic midlife transits, where you have something called Uranus opposition right before a Saturn opposition, which means you have to now wake up to who you really are. Your life's at the midpoint. And then with that, Saturn's like, okay, great. So how do we get things back into alignment? So I think, even though I'm talking about midlife transits, and you might not even be in the midlife, but I think that sort of that energy and understanding the energy will help us understand the energy of 2021. So something took root in 2018, 2019. Something started to open up with a new life. Maybe 2020 with Saturn and Pluto cleared to space, and now you're really in it. So how do you start to bring form to that? Let's say you made some radical changes the past couple of years. Okay, well, here comes Saturn. Saturn's in a fixed sign, Aquarius, and it wants systems and networks and grounding. So how do you start to really bring form, bring order, bring structure to this rather wild, chaotic new beginning that you've been living through? And if you don't, there's going to be some friction. There's going to be some tension. There's going to be some agita. So it's going to behoove you to try to figure out how to resolve this tension this year. And when we go through each sign, you're going to be like, oh, that's what you mean, Katie. These are the 3 dates of Saturn square Uranus, February 17th, June 14th, December 24th. If you are a friend in Australia or New Zealand, this might be a day forwards, give or take. Do note the degrees. This is a little bit of an intermediate or advanced point for those who do know their chart. And if you have planets that are in the fixed signs, so Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, and they are near these degrees, it's 2021 is really going to push your buttons, and we'll learn how to work with that and how to resolve some of that tension this year. So let's talk about the eclipses. Like I said, the eclipses are one of the major players in the astrology of any year. So for the most part, we have the eclipses in Gemini and Sagittarius. I said earlier, we do have one lunar eclipse in Taurus. It's sort of the preview of a story that's going to play out in 2022 and 2023. But for the most part, we're looking at this divide, this tension, this dynamic exchange between Gemini and Sagittarius. These are the 2 signs that talk about education, publishing, writing, communication, travel. Gemini is like words on a page. It's the things we learn. But in Sagittarius, it's like that the stuff that we read becomes the wisdom and knowledge, becomes the ideology, it becomes the philosophy, it becomes the religion, it becomes the law. So with the South Node in Sagittarius, there's like this story arc that's happening this year, and it was happening last year as well, is that we have to look at where we've been super tunnel visioning on something. We're like, this is what I believe in. It has to be this way. Can't be any other way. This is my truth. And then we have the blinders on and we miss everything else. I think for everybody with the South Node in Sagittarius this year, we have to be okay with being wrong. Maybe when you catch yourself getting in that space, like it can only be this way, just say to yourself, maybe I'm wrong. When you say, maybe I'm wrong, it kind of opens up a little bit of wiggle room. The energy does not feel so fixed. It doesn't feel so hard and rigid. It's more open. It says, I'm open to seeing a new idea, even though maybe I'm right, even though maybe I'm wrong. So with the North Node in Gemini this year, we now have to get new ideas, new perspectives, because maybe we're wrong. Maybe we have been seeing things wrong. Maybe it's not this way, or maybe it's that way and it's other ways. The North Node is in Gemini, and we have to sort of get back to basics. We have to get the new information. We have to get the new ideas. We have to, the movement from Sagittarius to Gemini is like we're at like, we have the PhD, we know a lot, we have the title and the degree, but we have to go back to school. We have to go back to elementary school because we need to get a whole new system of information and ideas. So just fun fact, the last time the North Node was in Sagittarius, sorry, the North Node was in Gemini, and the South Node was in Sagittarius, was 2001 to 2003. I mention this because 2001, 2002 in particular, we saw a lot of big changes in the travel industry because of 9/11. So I'm feeling that because the South Node is in Sagittarius until the end of 2021, I think it changes at the beginning of 2022. There's probably going to be some form of restricted travel until then. That's just a prediction. Maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong, because I love to travel. Right now I can't travel. Eclipses have a 18-19 year cycle, another fun fact, and they have a half cycle of 9 years. So the last time we had eclipses, when the North Node was in Sagittarius and the South Node was in Gemini, which is the flip of where it is now, was the very end of 2011, 2012, and 2010, 2011, and 2012. So maybe you're seeing some repeat of themes that were present in 2011, 2012, maybe beginning of 2013. So we now have to question what we believe in. We have to question our faith. Maybe you have lost faith in some way in the past year. Maybe you've lost faith in what you, and it could be the world, it could be institutions, it could be yourself. And so again, with the North Node and Gemini, we need new perspectives this year. As I was saying, on November 19th, plus, maybe plus a day for those in Australia and New Zealand, we're going to have a lunar eclipse in Taurus, which sort of kicks into this new story where instead of like the ideas and information, the faith, philosophy, travel, education of Gemini and Sagittarius, we're going to go into Taurus and Scorpio, which is very much about security, trust, stability, sensuality, vulnerability, money. So there's this new story that's going to start to open up, but you could possibly argue it's not a new story because the North Node is going to go into Taurus in 2022. Uranus is there. So it's really going to bring forward, again, some area of your life that's already seen a lot of change over the past few years. So here is I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty of this chart, but I wanted to kind of put it so that those who were either watching or had the slideshow, that they could just kind of pause and look at it. So we're going to have a lunar eclipse on May 26th of 2021. It's going to be at 5 degrees of Sagittarius. We had a lunar eclipse in June 5th, 2020, last year. So this eclipse has a thread to that time. This eclipse is going to sort of be a bookend to that eclipse. And again, it's really digging into these bigger themes around truth and meaning. Sagittarius is law. Maybe we're looking at something on a more societal level, legal level. But the thing that's different about this eclipse and the one that was in 2020, or even the solar eclipse at the end of 2020, is that Jupiter is in Pisces. So Jupiter is in this, it was in Capricorn in June of 2020, very different sign. So Jupiter in Pisces, this examination of faith really pushes us to examine inwardly. Sagittarius and Pisces are two sides of the same coin. They are both ruled by Jupiter. This is a little bit of a technical point, but Sagittarius is objective truth. It's truth because you read it in a book. It's truth because they taught it to you in school. It's truth because you went and you traveled to that other country and learned about it yourself. But Jupiter and Pisces, it's truth because I feel it. It's truth because I meditated and I felt something and I can't prove it to you, but I know it's my truth. So it's very subjective. So there's going to be some sort of shift in this eclipse story that we've been having since 2020, where I think also Jupiter in Pisces is very compassionate with everything that's going on. Like, how do we have more compassion? Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. How do we let go? How do we find truth within? How do we surrender? And then 2 weeks later, we have a solar eclipse at 19 Gemini on June 10th, 2021. This is more for you to note that May, June is probably going to kick a lot of things up. It's probably going to be a little bit more of a dramatic or intense time, especially if you are a Gemini or a Sagittarius, because the eclipses are happening in your sign, or if these two signs are a major player in your own astrology. This is actually the first solar eclipse that we have in Gemini, which means that we are sort of opening up this new time that's focused on new ideas, new information, new perspectives. Gemini talks about choice. So there's a sense of maybe needing to find new choices, look at things from different sides. This eclipse does square Neptune. So even though Gemini can kind of bring in a lot of information and a lot of ideas and new perspectives, I think sometimes when there's a square to Neptune, things aren't so clear. It can be a little confusing because Neptune in its highest form wants us to feel something beyond this world. It's a very spiritual sign. And we don't do Neptune from a spiritual perspective. We get the dissonance that we see with a lot of kind of classic negative Neptune, negative ego, getting caught in illusions, for example. So maybe this is a solar eclipse where we have to examine a lot of illusions, for example. And then at the end of the year, I mentioned this already, on November 19th, we have a lunar eclipse in Taurus. So this is going to be the beginning of a story that's going to thread its way through 2022 and into the beginning of 2023. So for those that are watching this webinar, we have some time until November, of course, but you're going to want to pay attention to what's starting to come into your life, even as early as October, because eclipses, they start to present themselves and make themselves known even a month before the actual eclipse. So this would take us into the middle of October. So if you are a Taurus, if you are a Scorpio, Scorpio is the opposite sign of Taurus, you're probably going to have an interesting end of the year because the eclipse is going to start to move into your sign. And when you have eclipses in your sign, it means your life is sort of, turning up the volume, so to speak. It's a time of new beginnings, new directions, could be moves, could be new relationships, could be new jobs, those kind of bigger things that punctuate our lives. And then 2 weeks later, on December 4th, we have a solar eclipse in Sagittarius. So we have 4 eclipses this year. That's a normal amount. Again, they happen every 6 months, but this solar eclipse in Sagittarius on December 4th is the last one that we have in Sagittarius for another 9 years. So this solar eclipse in some way is bringing us or beginning to bring to a close a story that opened up in June of 2020, this examination of our faith, our truth, Sagittarius is a very existential sign. So it's kind of looking at meaning. Jupiter is back in Aquarius for this eclipse. I think for the solar eclipse that was on December 14th of 2020, Jupiter was still in Capricorn. So I think with Jupiter and Aquarius for this eclipse, we're really looking at things at a societal level. So there's going to be something probably at the end of this year that it's more about what's happening on a collective level. So maybe there's stuff that's happening with the pandemic. Maybe there's something else. maybe we're having to resolve or kind of figure out some of these bigger things that we've been trying to figure out on a collective level. Like, how do we make this all work? Like I said at the very beginning of the webinar, Aquarius is a sign where it's either division or unity. So we're either connected and united on the level of the collective, or we're divided. And we hopefully can see that it's a little problematic when we're very divided. So maybe there's something about this time where how do we take proactive steps to create more unity instead of creating more division? Now let's look at what this means on a sign-by-sign level. So Aries and Aries rising, and let me just quickly state, because I get this question all the time. They said, okay, well, which one should I read for? Which one should I listen for? I'm an Aries, but I'm Gemini rising. Both you want to listen to. Why? Because it's sort of, you have these two parallel astrologies. You sort of exist in these two parallel energetic structures, and you want to start to synthesize these two stories and try to find, well, where are they overlapping? Where do you find the middle point of these two stories? So this is why it says Aries and Aries rising, or Taurus rising, for example. So Aries, here's what you need to understand. Your life encompasses all 12 signs, of course, but you are an Aries, or you're Aries rising. So the analogy that I've been using in a lot of my client work lately is that the chart is a house. It's a house that you live in. And let's say you're an Aries rising, little Aries sign over the front door, for example. So where's Saturn? Saturn being one of the major players of the astrology. Where can we find that story? Where's Uranus? Where's the tension between these two signs, these two parts of the house, these two parts of you, these two parts of your life? Where are the eclipses? Meaning, what part of your house, your astrology house, is seeing the most change this year? And where do you need to open up the most? Where is new opportunities coming in for you? So that's sort of a broader look, of course. But so Aries, Saturn is now pointing towards friends, community, the future. It's moved out of the career room of your house. Career room is the highest room in your house. And now it's led you to friendships, alliances, community, looking ahead. So Saturn can be a little brutal in this part of your astrology house, meaning it's now looking at all of your friendships. And this is a time when your friendships, your connections, your alliances have to pass Saturn's muster. Saturn wants everybody in your life to be a real worthwhile connection. The people in your life have to be the people that are going to see you through the years. Saturn is a long-term planet. It has a cycle of 30 years. So it's not thinking about 2021, it's thinking about the next 3 decades. So it's sort of going through your contacts list, and it's like delete, delete, delete. So you probably are seeing this already, but it's possible that you're going to have some friendships leave your life during this time because maybe they were never really truly friends. Maybe there's an ideological difference. Maybe these are friends that, because of the pandemic and because of the distancing that's happening right now, that you don't see them as much, and you realize that maybe they weren't a really true friend overall. That said, not to kind of focus on the bleaker side of things, you now have to make new friends. And you're like, how do I do that with, I can't even leave my house. Well, maybe that's the beauty of the internet, but you have to make new community. You have to get involved in new groups. You have to build new alliances. And if you've been separate in some way, maybe you haven't had any friends. So Saturn is like looking over your phone and it sees 4 contacts, and it's mostly takeout places and maybe your mom. But Saturn is now saying that you need people. We all need people. That's the beauty of astrology. It shows us, and the beauty of Saturn through all the houses or all the signs is that you have to create connection where there's been disconnection. So now you need the friends. Now you need the community. You can't be alone right now. Aries. Uranus, on the other hand, has been in the part of your astrology house, to use that metaphor, that's about money, how you earn a living, what you value, what you own. So there's this kind of bigger story around value and worth that's been opening up since 2018. Maybe you've seen some big changes in how you earn a living. Maybe you've seen big changes in the sort of the value you put on things. And I think the tension that's going to happen, if it's not happening already, is either how you value friendships or how friendships value you. Because at the heart of Uranus's time in Taurus for you is you finding new self-worth, especially if that's been a story that's been going on. Maybe you're seeing the major change because of the eclipses happening in the parts of your chart that do talk about education. Maybe you're going back to school, maybe you're taking more classes, maybe you're learning more. And then with the South Node in Sagittarius, you're having to look at and examine and possibly even dismantle a lot of old beliefs. And that's something that's continuing from 2020. And the area where you're seeing things open up the most, which is where the North Node is in Gemini, which is your room that talks about communication, talks about new ideas, new ways of thinking. So particularly Aries, you can't be stuck in your old ways of thinking. You can't be stuck in your old ways of belief. And you could be like, well, Katie, I don't have any friends, and that's just the way it is. But the astrology is saying that that can't be. You're going to really feel the tension this year if that's sort of where you're getting really stuck in that South Node. So you really have to open up your eyes right now. You have to really open up to how you see yourself, how you see yourself in the world, and even your place in community and society and humanity. Taurus and Taurus rising. So Saturn is now in your career room of your astrology house. So the Saturn hand on the clock, to kind of mix my metaphors, is now pointing towards career. So this is a time where over the next 2 years, until March of 2023, you now have to answer a very simple question. What do you want to be when you grow up? Doesn't matter if you are 22 or 82. Saturn is asking you this question. So you're now opening into a time where you're maybe working harder. You now have to take a next step up in your professional life. But if you do not like what you are doing, then this is 2021 is going to be a year where you are having to make some changes. So how do you answer Saturn's question? How do you figure out your role in the world, the title that you're going to have after your name? And it could be a time when you're having to take on new responsibilities as well. Meanwhile, Uranus is in Taurus. It's been in Taurus since 2018, 2019. So you are reinventing you. And if you are a Taurus, if you are a Taurus rising, it's quite possible that when you look back over the last 2-3 years, you see major changes, especially if you're born in the earlier parts of Taurus. So the end of April, going into the beginning of May. So you're at a time with Uranus in your sign where you now have to be 100% you. You cannot hold back in any way if you are trying to be the lawyer, to use my example, and that's not who you really are. You want to be a massage therapist, or you want to be a musician, or whatever it is. You have to be that. And you might see some tension this year where you've been starting to open up into a new you, and maybe that new you, or the you that you always were, isn't in alignment with your professional direction. Or you've been making some big changes and now you have to orient your life differently. Saturn's like, great, you figured out who you are finally. So how do we now start to build a new life, build a new direction, build new structures around these powerful awakenings and transformations? But you might see that tension happening between some sort of new beginning that's been coming into play and the part of you that's still got one foot in the old world. And I will say this, to be fair, Taurus, you're a sign that just by your nature wants to keep things the same. It's not a bad instinct. It's, in fact, it's a necessity to life, is to kind of create stability so that life can flourish. You know, the soil has to be, there can't be storms, and you're trying to plant seeds. So Taurus talks about, okay, let's make things nice and easy. But you're sort of getting a lot of push right now to really let go of the things that you've been really holding on to for the sake of preservation, for the sake of security, that are actually hindering you. So really keep that in mind, because Taurus's instinct can also lead it to hoard. And this is a time when you can't hoard anything anymore. So maybe you're seeing a lot of change right now because of the eclipses. They're in your signs of money and income and the things that you own. So maybe there's changes in income, changes in what you own, but this even talks about on an emotional level. The South Node is in Sagittarius, so you have to now really look at what you've been holding on to on an emotional level, and maybe that's really hampering your ability to kind of move forward in life. So you might be doing a lot of internal digging this year. That said, you know, with the North Node in Gemini, this is a time to really create new solid ground in your life, something that Taurus loves, but it has to be built on something very new. It can't be built on the past. Gemini and Gemini rising. So Saturn is now pointing towards faith, truth, meaning, finding answers. So I think it's important to point out for Gemini and Gemini rising is that Saturn has now left, I call it the 8th room of your astrology house. So you've spent the last 2-3 years doing a lot of really deep internal work, and it probably has been very difficult at times. I think when I was talking about the astrology of last year, I was like, Gemini and Capricorn are really in a pickle right now. So you're sort of coming out of this really intense emotional time, and then how do you make sense of that? How has 2018, 2019, 2020 really shaped what you believe in? Maybe it shook your faith. Maybe it made you stronger, and now you know what you believe in. You believe in yourself, or you believe in something else. Maybe you prayed your way through 2020, and now you believe in God more than ever. But nevertheless, you're trying to figure out what you believe in right now. So it's a very existential time for Gemini and Gemini rising. You're really searching for meaning. Maybe you're going back to school. I mean, I know we're in kind of a funny time right now. So if this were a normal time, so I'd be like, yeah, maybe you're doing some major travel, some serious study, maybe you're going abroad, but that's a little bit difficult right now. So we have to sort of modify our interpretations based on what's happening right now. But do know that typically this is a time where it is about going back to school or really looking at the world differently, or maybe even like major travel. But ultimately, the question that you're trying to answer by the end or by March 2023 is, what do you believe in? What's your philosophy? What's your faith? And of course, this doesn't have to be religion. This could just be like your sense of convictions and your the structure of what your own personal faith and meaning is. Uranus, on the other hand, has been in a very kind of quiet part, or normally very quiet part of your chart. So Uranus is trying to open your eyes to your blind spots, to your unconscious, to the parts of yourself that you've actually never seen. And it's also trying to open you up to your spirituality. Spirituality is something very different than religion. Spirituality is something that you find within yourself. It's a very kind of personal relationship with something divine or something unseen, as opposed to this relationship to something in a book or relationship to something in a church. So something's trying to open up for you right now, Gemini, and this can include your spirituality. This can include your intuition, like maybe you're opening up your psychic gifts and ability right now. That said, that there's this kind of tension that's happening between maybe how you were taught to see the world versus what you're now seeing, because there's a way that, in a way, this is a time when the veil is being pulled back for you, Gemini. The eclipses right now are happening in Gemini. So it's new beginnings, it's new times, new directions, new initiatives. And the South Node is in Sagittarius, which is your relationship sign. So relationships are a big focus right now. Because the South Node's in Sagittarius, maybe you're having to work through something that feels fated or karmic or an old story. Nevertheless, it doesn't mean that you can't have a relationship right now, but maybe some new relationships are coming in at the moment. Sorry, somebody just came into the... Nevertheless, the North Node is in Gemini. So 2020, 2021 are times of new beginnings, new directions. And I think that the opening happens right now is when you take initiative, you take direction. And you can't, let's say you can't rely on anybody, but it has to come from you. And maybe in the past, you sort of deferred to other people, but this is the time where you have to take the lead. You have to take the initiative. Cancer rising. So you are in a time where Saturn is now in the part of your chart that means you have to face yourself. So Saturn is in what I call the 8th room. The 8th room, to go back to Gemini for a moment, that's where Gemini was for a couple of years. So now it's your time, Cancer. We all have to go through the 8th room of our astrology house. It only happens once, twice, maybe every 30 years, but it's a time when we have to do deep inner work. So for the next couple of years, you're doing a lot of internal work. When Saturn leads you into this space, I always tell people it's good to have a therapist, because this is, you want somebody to kind of hold you by the hand right now and lead you through the spaces within yourself that maybe you get stuck in. So Cancer, just by your nature, you tend to hold on to the past. You tend to hold on to emotion, which for some things is great. You are the repository of memory. Your planet is the moon. You talk about nostalgia in the past, but sometimes we can get stuck in nostalgia and get stuck in the past. So Saturn is saying, okay, we've got to do the inner work. We have to heal the things that we haven't healed. And so you're going to be doing deep work for the next 2 years. Meanwhile, Uranus is in your sign of friends and communities. So you're opening up to new people coming into your life, new friends, new communities, people that awaken you to seeing things in a way that maybe you never saw things before, maybe saw the world or thought of humanity and the collective before. But you might be seeing the tension between the stuff that you're holding on an emotional level and how that's really holding you back from moving forward towards the future. So just keep in mind, Cancer, that the more that you do the work this year on a personal level, the more that it helps you to open up to new futures and new social connection, new communities. And then with the eclipses happening in your sign, it's in a part of your chart that talks about service, spirituality, this kind of continuing with this inner work. The South Node is in the part of your chart that talks about health and wellness. So you have to really look at how you take care of yourself. Maybe there's themes around health that's coming up. I always tell people if eclipses are in the health area of the chart, you just want to be proactive. You want to take care of yourself. If you're hearing me say this and you're like, oh, I do nothing, I don't eat well, I don't get some fresh air, whatever your body needs, this is just all about listening to what your body needs, then these eclipses are really trying to get you to make some changes. With the North Node and what's called your 12th sign, your 12th room, this is a really excellent time to kind of let go of any addictions. Anything, and especially if it's sort of tangled up with these emotional connections, stuff from childhood that maybe you're still holding on to, that maybe it's, help fueled an addiction. So these eclipses that I mentioned earlier in the webinar are kind of helping you to let go of the past, to surrender, and to just, because we all need to let go at some point. It's just kind of the natural cycle of things. And when we don't let go, we keep holding on to things and it becomes a little bit of a mess. Leo and Leo rising. So Saturn is now pointing towards relationship. So if you are presently in a relationship, Saturn is now looking over your relationship, and relationships plural, because this is not necessarily romantic relationship, it's all relationships. How do you connect to people? So Saturn actually loves relationships. Saturn says that we live in a world where we need people, we need connection. We cannot do things by ourselves. We need people in order to create equity and balance in our lives. So Saturn, if you are in a relationship and it's unfortunately a mess, Saturn's like, how do we fix this? How do we clean it up? How do we make it stronger? If you're in a relationship and it's long past its sell-by date, so to speak, then Saturn's like, it's got to go. It's not gonna support you, because remember, Saturn is a planet that thinks about not just the year, it thinks about the next 2-3 decades. This is a very classic time for a serious relationship to come in. And it's often when I go back and I do the astrology, to see when people got married or got into major partnerships, there was Saturn, because again, Saturn loves relationship. So if you're not in a relationship, this might be a time when there is serious relationship. And if marriage is something that you are interested in, maybe there's a marriage or maybe some sort of commitment, like moving in together. Meanwhile, Leo, you're one of the 4 signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, that are seeing some big changes this year. You are what are called the fixed signs. So Uranus is in your career sign. I've been having this conversation with my Leo rising clients. Uranus is saying to you, like, we now have to do what we want to do in the world. So this is like if you were trying to be a lawyer and it's not who you really are, it's where you sort of forced yourself into a role because of somebody else's expectations, then you're going to see some friction this year. So usually the provocative question that I ask people is, what do you really want to do? And sometimes you're like, no, I love my job. Great. Fantastic. Okay, well, how do you do it bigger? How do you do it more? How do you stop playing safe? How do you get out of old patterns? If you don't love your work, If you're doing something that's not in alignment with who you are, then how do you now start to take the steps that you need to take in 2021? And this is for everybody. Those 3 dates that I told you about, the February 17th, the June 14th, the December 24th, when we have these 3 Uranus, Saturn square Uranus, you're going to feel the push to make these changes or to resolve this split or to deal with this tension. So I'm saying this to Leo in particular, I'm saying this to Taurus, I'm saying this to Scorpio, I'm saying this to Aquarius. Like these 3 dates, compared to all the other signs, are really going to push you. Not to say that the other signs are going to feel it, it's going to feel it differently and in different parts of their lives. So you're going to have to resolve some sort of tension that's happening between your professional life and your relationship life. So for example, if you have a partnership and you're making big changes in your world, maybe you're seeing how it's like, how do you and a partner start to get on the same page? You know, make sure that you have a partner that's actually really excited about you being you and doing what you need to do in the world. With the eclipses happening in part of your chart that talks about, sorry, let's do some quick math, friends and community, but also you, maybe you're having to see how you have to open up more to connection, open up to friendship more. Maybe, Leo, you've been kind of a little stuck in yourself, or maybe there's something about the self that's kind of preventing you from having the connection that you need to have. We'll see how everyone's different, of course. But with these eclipses and Gemini in your sign of friends and community and humanity and society, that's where you're going to see the most, oh God, I can't speak English, area open up the most. So you really want to build new alliances. You really, if there's something that's holding you back from connecting out in the world, like this is your year to kind of push out of that old way. Virgo and Virgo rising. Saturn is now in the part of your astrology house. We'll call it the 6th room. The 6th room is actually a room that you are quite familiar with, Virgo. It's a room that is, by its kind of how things were built, it is your room. It's about health and wellness. It's about work and projects. It's about the details of daily life. So Saturn is now there, and Saturn is like looking over your life and saying, okay, how do we get even more organized? And maybe you're like, how does a Virgo get more organized? But it's possible that whatever system that you've created to create order in your life it's outdated in some way. Because Saturn, by its nature, wants equity and balance. And even the most well-intentioned Virgo will create a system that maybe fundamentally is out of balance. So how do you start to build new systems? How do you start to put your day-to-day life in a new order? Or maybe make sure everything's just the current order is running smoothly. Saturn's now in a health room. And I always tell people when Saturn's looking over your health, you want to be proactive. So if you know you need to stop smoking, or you know you need to do something different, or organize your day-to-day life, or maybe make a doctor's appointment, then work with Saturn, because that's what Saturn's trying to do. When Saturn goes to this area, it also wants purity. So it wants you to clean out anything that's a toxin. It could be something on a diet level. It could be something on a substance level. It could be something on a day-to-day level. Maybe it's just the toxicity that shows up in our relationships or other parts of our day-to-day life. The eclipses that are happening in 2021 are really pulling at a major part of your chart. So you're seeing the Gemini eclipses in your career sign. You're seeing the Sagittarius eclipses in your home sign. So there is some sort of dynamic tension that's happening between your professional life and your home life. Maybe this is a time when it's about new career options, new career paths, maybe a promotion, maybe a job change. But what is that doing to your home life? Maybe with these eclipses, you're seeing a change in your family, a change in your living situation. Maybe you're making a move in 2021. Maybe you've already made a move because you've already been having eclipses in this part of your chart since 2020. Nevertheless, if career is something that you need to kind of take some more proactive steps on with the North Node in Gemini this year, you really want to use that to your advantage. So go after the new job. Try to work with a career counselor, set new goals, set new ambitions, maybe get your professional life a little bit more in order because it's really going to serve you well in 2021. Libra and Libra rising. So Saturn is now pointing you towards a part of your chart that when you read about this part of the chart in astrology, they always say it's about identity and creativity and self-expression, which of course it is. But what's really at the core of that part of your chart, ergo that part of you? So how do you now start to really examine who you are, the essence of who you are on a deeper level? What is it that fuels everything that you do? It's passion. It's that feeling we get when we are doing something that we love. So if you're a little burnt out, for example, Libra, then you have to figure out, because it's Saturn's making this your homework, what's going to really light your fire right now. How do you get in touch with what makes you you? How do you play more? How do you create more? Incidentally, this is a part of your chart that talks about children. Maybe there's a pregnancy. If this is, of course, relevant to you in your life. So nevertheless, you have to take you and you have to take your talent seriously right now, Libra. On the other side of things, Uranus is in a part of your chart, the 8th room, as I like to call it, where you now have to do a lot of deep examination of the psyche and the self. Uranus is saying whatever pain and suffering and trauma and stuff from the past that you are holding on to that is actually negatively affecting how you express yourself has to go. So that's where you're going to see the tension this year. That's where you're going to see the push. So if you're actively working on yourself and you're facing the parts of yourself, Libra, where you have been, it's like the shadow, it's self-destruction, it's the negative facets of self, so that you can then reconnect with who you really are and what your talents are, how to share you in the world. Because if we have a suffering, for example, we don't think we're good enough, or something happened in the past, or something happened in our childhood where we're afraid to really be vulnerable and to share who we are. This could actually be a really positive time for you, Libra. So you want to do the work this year. And otherwise, you're going to really see that tension between the shadow self and then the part of the self that you know. With the eclipses in your signs of education, information, ideas, communication, and travel, that's where you're going to see the most change this year. With the South Node in the part of your chart that talks about voice, communication, like you have to take a second look at what you're thinking, what you're saying, what you've been taught, and then now look and how you can share what you know with the world in some way. This might be a year or even going into 2022 where you are focusing more on education, taking more classes, but the bigger question remains, like if you're taking a lot of classes right now, what is it leading you towards? Is it just another class, or is it actually giving you a degree? Is it helping you in your professional life? So you might be thinking about, okay, well, how do I get the education that's then going to help me take whatever next step forward in my professional life or going forward? But you are sort of examining truth and meaning and how you see the world and these kind of deeper themes around faith. Scorpio rising. So Saturn is now pointing towards home and family. So Saturn has gotten to the bottom of your chart. And I, tell Scorpio that you're in the time where it's time to settle down. Um, so Saturn is looking at your home life, and it's like, how do we create new systems in our home life? How do we, maybe there's a major move, maybe you're planning for a major move, maybe you're thinking about purchasing a home or purchasing your first home while Saturn is in Aquarius until 2023. But this is the time when you have to sort of get really rooted and grounded, which comes, ironically, because here is Uranus. Uranus is over in your relationship sign. So do keep in mind, Scorpio, and I said this for Taurus, I said it for Leo, that you're one of the 4 signs where you're seeing the most push to change and transform this year. I will say that we were, over the past decade, we've been having a lot of intense astrology happening in what's called the cardinal signs. So your Aries, your Cancer, your Libra, your Capricorn, like those signs for 10 years, and you could argue still a little bit more, we're seeing a lot of push to transform. And so now things have sort of shifted, the narrative has shifted over to fixed signs. So over the next few years, it's really the fixed signs that are seeing the most pressure to transform. So Uranus is now in relationships. So Scorpio, you now have to open up to other people. You cannot do things just yourself. You cannot rely on just yourself. So it's possible that you've seen a lot of big changes in your relationships in just 2 years, 2-3 years. Maybe you were married and you're not married anymore. Maybe somebody has come into your life who is radically different than before. Uranus. Uranus talks about, like I said, trying to get us out of our own way. So somebody may be in your life that is trying to open you up. Maybe they're not meant to stick around. Maybe they're just here to be the catalyst. Or maybe you do meet somebody and it's a long-term serious relationship, but it's somebody that's so different than, an ex-husband or an ex-partner or an ex-whoever. So that's where maybe you're seeing a lot of change this year. It's like with Uranus sort of really pushing upon you, Scorpio, to make changes. And meanwhile, you're like, but I want to settle down. I want to get stable. I want to get grounded. It's like you're having to resolve the tension between these 2 signs or these 2 parts of your life. The eclipses are happening in your money sign. Your money signs are Sag and Gemini. So you're seeing a lot of changes in either income, how you earn a living, what you value. Maybe you're making major purchases right now, investments. So this is where there's a lot of movement in your life, Scorpio. I will say with the North Node in Gemini, Gemini is your 8th sign. Scorpio is the 8th sign. It's a little bit of a technical point. So you're right now with the eclipses, you're having to do a lot of deep internal examination. And that, weirdly enough, is the area that you're seeing the most open. You're getting that push from the universe to really dive into your unknown and do the work. And Scorpio normally is like totally okay with that. But I don't know, maybe this is me as a Scorpio speaking, is that we have a reputation for being a sign that's so, wants change, but that's actually a lie. We only want change when it's on our terms. So I think these eclipses are really forcing you to get real, to get raw, to open up, to look at intimacy and vulnerability in ways that you never have. And that's the area that you're going to see the most growth this year, should you open up to that. Sagittarius rising. We're starting to get to the last quarter of the zodiac. Saturn is now out of your money sign when it was in Capricorn, but it's now in the part of your chart, part of your astrology house that talks about communication, ideas, information. So Saturn is now trying to get you to get very serious about how you communicate. Maybe you need to work on your voice. Maybe you've had a hard time getting your voice heard, and Saturn is like, we have to make this a work. Because Saturn talks about growth on a certain level, but it's talking about growth that takes time, the growth that comes through maturity, the growth that comes through doing something over and over again. So Saturn, you're probably going to be taking a lot of classes the next couple of years, if not in 2021. Of course, you're probably maybe even giving those classes yourself. This is a part of the chart that does talk about education and teaching. And Aquarius is an intellectual smarty pants sign. And you, Sagittarius, just by the nature of who you are, you know a lot. So maybe it's time for you to share through your voice what you know. Maybe you're teaching, and maybe I jumped ahead, but anyway, so you're opening up that voice, but then here comes Uranus. Uranus is in the part of your chart that talks about your day-to-day life and maybe in your health and how you take care of yourself. So maybe you've been seeing already a lot of big changes happening since 2018 in your day-to-day life. And certainly going from 9 to 5 in the office, just being home all the time is a big change. How do you kind of create new ways of being in this time? How do Saturn is in the part of your chart that does talk about the neighborhood. Maybe you're spending more time in your community, your local community, your neighborhood. But there is a bit of a tension that's happening this year. Like you've got to make some new choices in your life. You've got to make some serious choices in your life. And maybe some of these serious choices are around work, projects. Maybe they're around how you take care of yourself, exercise, diet. Maybe they talk about your relationship with your body in some way. So that's where part of the tension for you is happening this year. The major changes with the eclipses are happening with you. The South Node is in Sagittarius right now, so the eclipses are in Sagittarius. It's time where life is more highlighted for you. But with the South Node in Sagittarius, you're realizing you can't do things on your own. You need other people. You need relationship. You need partnership. You need connection. So with the North Node in Gemini, your relationship sign, these eclipses are showing the most growth and the most openness with new relationships coming in. So it's very possible that if you're not in a relationship right now, Sagittarius, that you could be this year. Somebody new could come into your life, but the bigger overall thing, even if you're not in a relationship or if you're in a relationship currently, is that you are opening up to other people. If you are in a relationship and it's not in a good place, look to see around those eclipses, because eclipses make things happen, and it might bring whatever tension that's in a relationship to the forefront to be dealt with. But this could be a time of a lot of personal growth in terms of new people, new systems, new communities, new friendships coming into your life. I will say also, because Jupiter is in Aquarius for most of this year, there is a lot of focus on communication and education for most of 2021. But when Jupiter does dip into Pisces, May to July, I think it's like May 25th to July 28th, you're going to go into a new time, but it's just going to be a preview. So Sagittarius, you're on a larger track of time where it's about settling down. In 2023, in March of 2023, Saturn will go into Pisces. Pisces forms the bottom of your chart, its roots, its foundation. So with Jupiter sort of dipping its toe into that part of your chart this year, even if it's just for a few months, it's sort of starting to point you towards a phase of life that hasn't quite come into focus yet. Home, family, roots, foundation, settling down. So maybe the whole, like, if you are single, if this is something that you want, of course, like if somebody new comes into your life and it's a serious relationship, this might make some changes in the home. This might make you think about, your living situation differently. This might open you up to bigger questions around, where do I live? Who do I live with? Do I want a family? Because in a couple of years, when Jupiter goes into Aries, it will be in the part of your chart that does talk about children. If this is something that, of course, is relevant to you and what you want, but you're opening up to new relationships right now. Capricorn and Capricorn rising. And also I see that there's a couple of comments or questions. I will check them at the end of this section. Capricorn, so you are coming out of a bit of a difficult time. Saturn was in Capricorn 2018, 2019, and 2020. So you were in this new time that on it by its own would have been a time about taking on new responsibilities, stepping up, all these sort of natural Capricorn things. So when Saturn was in Capricorn, it set a higher bar for you. But we had Pluto in Capricorn, and Pluto, quite frankly, has been in Capricorn since the beginning of 2008. So Saturn was in Capricorn, but it's like, but Pluto is there. Pluto is tearing things down, and you're trying to build a new life while Pluto is tearing things down. It's kind of been this thing for the past few years, and you're probably really tired. But here comes Saturn, and Saturn, your planet, is now pointing towards income, money, material stability. So how do you start to create a little bit more stability in your life after you've had to make a lot of really intense change? So does that mean earning an income differently? Does this mean looking at what you own differently? Maybe even looking at self-worth and value as well. With Uranus in the part of your chart that talks about identity and the self and self-expression and creativity, this is a time when you now are opening up. You got 4 more years left of you really discovering who you are. And who you maybe thought you were in 2018 is probably not who you're thinking you are now, and who you're not going to be in 2025, 2026. And it's not because you're becoming somebody that you're not. It's because you now have to be the person you always were. So as you are opening up and changing and transforming who you are, there might be some tension between what you valued before, let's say before 2018, and what you value now. And how do you resolve that split? And of course, this is about material stability, but there's this more intangible thing around currency and worth, and like, what is your worth? And what is your worth now that you are who you really are, and not who maybe your parents wanted or your friends wanted to be? What does that currency look like now? So this is where you're sort of seeing the tension in 2021. With the eclipses, they're in your 12th and your 6th. So the South Node is in Sagittarius. It's in your 12th sign. So you're in a time where you really have to let go. You have to connect to your spirituality. You have to shed the past. You have to rest. You have to recuperate. You have to clean out. With the North Node in Gemini in what's called your 6th house, your 6th room, this is a time to make positive changes in how you take care of yourself. How do you organize your day-to-day life? How do you kind of create new systems, new networks? If there's something about your day-to-day life that's a mess, like, how do you rectify that? Because the eclipses really want you to get grounded and get into your body in a way that maybe you haven't been in your body before. So you might be getting more organized this year and really making your physical health and maybe even your spiritual health a major priority this year. Aquarius rising in the second to last zodiac of the sign. Aquarius, all eyes are on you right now because Saturn and Jupiter, for most of 2021, is in Aquarius. So Aquarius, you are in a new time in your life. Saturn is, we would say in astrology, Aquarius is ruled by Saturn. So you are at a time where you're starting a new chapter, new story. It's actually a new 30-year story, not to kind of overwhelm you. Because Saturn is your planet, your life runs on a bigger 30-year story arc, not you and Capricorn are in the same boat. It means your life has these distinct 2.5 to 3 year chapters because that's how long Saturn spends in a sign. So 2018, 2019, 2020, for the most part, Saturn was in Capricorn. So you are at the end of a story, the end of a cycle. You are letting go and preparing for a very different life. So now Saturn is in Aquarius, and in a way, you have to get your life in order. You have to get your house in order. Saturn, when it's in this part of the chart, it sets a high bar. It says, okay, here are our new initiatives. Here are our new goals. You now have to be the leader. You now have to be the person who is responsible. You now have to be the proverbial parent, so to speak. So it's a little bit of a heavy time, Aquarius, but it's like you might be feeling the burdens a little bit of having to take on a lot. When Saturn is sort of looking over your shoulder, I just say do what Saturn wants, like get your life in order, clean out, create new systems. You're an Aquarius. Aquarius is all about systems and networks, and really see where there is imbalance in your life, because ultimately Saturn wants balance. Uranus, on the other hand, is at the bottom of your chart. It's in the part that talks about home and family roots and foundation. So you are maybe making some major moves. Maybe you already have made a major move. Maybe you need to make either a literal or metaphoric change in home and family. If the most radical thing you can do right now on a home perspective is move in, meaning like you've been in the same place for 5 years and it's still boxes, then great. Get furniture, make it a home if that's radical for you. If home and family is steeped in the pain and suffering of the past, you have to release yourself from that. You have to create a space, a home. This is why a move might be a part of it that actually is going to be the place that you put your roots in. So as you're starting to make major changes in your home environment, that's maybe creating some tension with the part of you that has to like take on new responsibilities and exist in a very new time in your life. And Aquarius, just like I was saying with Taurus and Leo and Scorpio, like you're one of these 4 signs that's getting a lot of pressure this year. I would look at those 3 dates that I mentioned, February 17th, June 14th, and December 24th, because these 3 dates, they're kind of inflection points. They're really gonna push you to make or to try to resolve that friction, that tension. If big new things are happening in your life, I have one of my closest friends is an Aquarius, and she just had twins. So her home environment is radically changing. Like her family just doubled overnight. But now she has to take on new responsibilities. So that's an example of like how she's going to have to, as an Aquarius, resolve this tension and this split. The eclipses are happening in the part of the chart that talks about friendship and community and the self and individuality. So you now have to open up to who you are on a bigger level. You have to prioritize yourself. You have to really express who you are. And maybe sometimes as an Aquarius, you get a tendency to be a little separate because it's a sign that kind of takes a step back and looks at things from a higher vantage instead of being like right in it. So you have to, in a way, find who you are right now. And that means that you're going to have the most growth this year when you prioritize you. You make time for play, you make time for creativity, you make time for self-expression and individuality. Yes, friendships are important, community is important, but how do you find the balance between the two? Lastly, Pisces. I know you all are putting some questions in the chat. I will get to those in a moment. Pisces rising. So Saturn is now pointing to the part of your chart that talks about I call it, okay, imagine a house. This house has 12 rooms. Now Saturn has gotten to the last room. The last room is what I affectionately call the God room. God, source, spirituality, whatever you want to call it. It's the room that you go into that room, and it's a very sacred room. You cannot go into that room with your ego. If you go into that room with your ego, you're going to get a lot of dissonance, a lot of negative reverb. So you're in this time where over the next 2 years, so 2021, 2022, first few months of this year, or 2023, where you're trying to shed the past, you're coming to the end of a 30-year chapter, and you're trying to let go. You're trying to open up your spirituality. You're trying to connect to the deepest parts of yourself. You're trying to answer existential questions. Meanwhile, Jupiter, your planet, is in the same room as Saturn for most of 2021, which means that you, on a deeper level, are also reflecting, searching within for answers, trying to find meaning with everything that's happening in this world, or maybe even everything that's happening in your world. So with Jupiter there from January to May, and then the end of July into the end of December. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Yes, that's correct. Because it does go into Pisces from May to July. You might feel that life is in a little bit of a liminal place. What does this mean? When life is in a liminal place, it's like you're trying to have a new beginning, but it's not quite happening. So I would say for you, Pisces, that for the most part, this is a time of rest. This is a time of preparation. This is a time of going through your old life to prepare for a new life. So Jupiter goes into Pisces just as a preview. I believe it's May 25th until July 28th. So that, what was that, 2 months? That 2-month window is sort of a peek into a new life. And that peek is just a peek, it's just a preview. It's a time to give you a sort of like context or awareness of what this new chapter of your life is about. And then Jupiter goes back into Aquarius at the end of July 2021, and you're back in the part of where you're trying to wrap up an old life and prepare for a new life. It's a very, like I said, very spiritual, very existential time. Meanwhile, you have Uranus in the part of your chart that talks about voice and communication, ideas and information. So you have to now use your voice in a way that you've never used your voice before. And to be fair, this has been a story that's been going on for the last 2-3 years. So maybe you normally don't speak up, and suddenly in the past couple of years, you've been speaking up more. Or maybe your intuition has been getting stronger. Pisces is just out of the box, a very intuitive sign. So as you are sort of dipping in and out of this very spiritual place, this very liminal space of retreat, and then another, dipping into this new world, this new life, this new cycle, you might have reflections, you might have insights, you might have something to say and something to share about this time, and maybe it's even very intuitively driven, but nevertheless, Uranus is trying to open you up to seeing things differently, to looking at choice differently, looking at your options differently, and there might be some tension as a result because you're sort of like wanting to make some changes in your life, but you're still a little bit stuck, so to speak, in an old life, an old world. I don't want to say stuck because it's really important. This is a comment that's relevant to everybody, that astrology teaches us that there's a time for everything. And that as frustrating as it is, even Mercury retrograde is a time for something. It's just maybe a different time than what we want that time to be. So you're in a time, a very sacred and necessary time to let go, to recuperate, to rest, to relax and prepare for new life. So don't rush it. But you might feel that tension because you're getting all these ideas and all this information. You want to go and implement it, and it's not time yet. But nevertheless, you might feel that tension, of course, at these different inflection points that I was talking about in February, June, and December. With the eclipses happening in, these are what are called angular eclipses for you, you have the South Node in your career sign. So maybe you're seeing some changes in your professional life. You're seeing changes in your career. Maybe there's a job change. Maybe there's a change in focus in your professional life, change in duties and responsibilities. But with your North Node in Gemini, and it's at the bottom of your chart, maybe you're moving. Maybe you're making some changes in your home environment. Maybe there's something about family that's really highlighted at this time, but you're trying to, it's like this weird dichotomy. It's like on one end things are ending, but another end things are trying to take root. You're trying to put, your roots down in this life. So that's a look at the 12 signs. I'm gonna stop the share, excuse me, and look at the questions. Hang on. Jupiter is in Aries. That's a good question, Erica. I gotta remember. I don't have it handy, or maybe I can have it handy. Let me just look it up real quick, because I just looked at this. Jupiter goes into Aries on May 10th. It probably dips back out into Pisces at some point, and then it goes back into Aries on December 20th of 2022. So May 10th, 2022, it goes back into Pisces. I got like a Google Calendar with all these dates in it. It goes back into Pisces on October 22nd and then back into Aries in December. This is all 2022. I got a request to share the Saturn square Uranus dates again. Okay, I will share that again. Give me a second. And we're gonna, gotta go back. Hang on, everybody. I maybe went too far. So just for you, Michelle, these are the Saturn square Uranus dates. So February 17th, 2021, June 14th, 2021, December 24th, 2021. And then I have the degrees on the side, so you can see what degrees, if this is the information that you need. So just looking at other questions. Yeah, Kim is like, baby, career. So the astrology is like this beautiful system where you like walk into a room, and that room is about creativity, but it's also the room that's got the baby symbol over the front door of that room. So it's like, yeah, do I focus on my talents, or do I focus on actually producing something physical, meaning a child? So this is a little side note. I don't have children myself. It's just something that as an astrologer, I get these questions about children and pregnancy. So I've just paid attention more to it. So funny enough, side note, when a woman has her first child, sometimes it shows up as a career transit. And you're thinking, well, why would that be? Well, if you think about it, having a baby, and this is the same for a father, you saw this from my dad's chart as well. It's a change in your career. You now have a new title. That title is mother, that title is father. So this is why sometimes when you see a connection between the 5th house and the 10th house, it could be a child, but it could also mean something about how you're taking your creativity and your talents and putting it out into the world. Michelle asks, she's a Taurus Aquarius rising. Will these be significant dates? So those 3 dates that I shared, the February 17th, the June 14th, and the December 24th, will something happen on those dates? Maybe, maybe not. But it's important to just be aware of these dates. So what could happen? Let's say you started to make some big changes starting 2018, 2019. Okay, I'll give you a personal example. Some of you might already know this, but I had a 20-year career in graphic design and IT, web design. It was not my path in life, but you leave college, it's 2000, and what am I gonna do? Well, the internet seems to be this new thing that everybody's into. So I sort of self-taught myself how to be a web designer. Anyway, so come my Saturn return, this was 13 years ago, which kind of scary to think about. I realized that that's not my path. I mean, I already knew that. How did I know that it wasn't my path? It's because there was no passion. When you have a passion about something, when it lights you up, that's your sign that there's something there for you. I started doing astrology. I was like, I want to be an astrologer when I grow up. I'm like 30 at this point. And I started Empowering Astrology in 2010, and I was doing it as a side hustle. But it was not, to keep doing my day job was not my fate. So the astrology over the past 2 years, Uranus went into Taurus, and Uranus was like, okay, it's time for you to actually do you and not sit in a beige cubicle and try to be something that you're not. So this is like a personal example, like something began in that time. I quit my job in March of 2019 to do this full time. So now with these 3 dates that I gave you, for me, they might be a push for me to further resolve these major changes that I made 3 years ago. Now, or maybe I've been doing the work, I don't know, you'll have to tell me. And now how do I take it to the next level? How does it now come more into form? It's one thing to kind of quit your job and then become self-employed and become an astrologer. They don't teach you that at college. There's no career counseling on how to be an astrologer. So how do you create new systems and networks and new form for you to actually do this in the world? Michelle says that she's changing careers after 21 years. So yeah, I know this from personal experience. Like I made a midlife change. Uranus went into Taurus. I have Uranus in Scorpio. They're opposite signs. So I'm 42 right now. So Uranus, I'm having what's called the Uranus opposition. If you are in your early 40s, Uranus is saying to each and every one of you, us, you now have to do what you came here to do on this planet. You cannot try to be what your parents want, what society wants, what your friends want. And either you listen to that or you don't. Here's the thing, you have free will. I could still be, I could still be sitting in that cubicle, but 2 things. 1, pandemic. 2, I think that if I had tried to stay, something would have happened because the universe was trying to get me to actually be me, even though it's terrifying to be me. Kim's also changing career. If you all have any other questions, let me know. Kim says she just found me yesterday. No, here's the thing. I get to do what I love. I get to share astrology with you all. I came to astrology in 2008. There's that year for me. It was my Saturn return. Let me be a little bit more specific. I was always into astrology. I've been into astrology since I was a teenager. But it wasn't until my Saturn return in 2008 where I was like, wait a second, you mean there's this thing called Saturn and it tells you about why you came here and it tells you about the master plan of your life and what you're growing up to become. And it's making sense of why my life is a whatever blank expletive show right now. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, why didn't more people know about this? And it sent me down a rabbit hole. And that's one of the reasons why I love Saturn so much. Just looking at some of the comments. Jennifer is a Scorpio, Taurus rising, just launched her first online program. She's also 42, seems like the year to do so. Yes, because age 42, 43 is the Uranus opposition, where Uranus is like, this is not who you really are, or this is who you are, do it more. And then 44, 45 is when you have something called a Saturn opposition. And Saturn's like, okay, midlife, time out. Let's make sure that you are living the master plan. And that's why sometimes the early to mid 40s coincide with major changes in life, because we're trying to get our lives back into alignment. I'm just sharing you voice that came out at I mean, yeah, this is the thing about us. I'm sorry, look at the comments. We all have our own time. It's why some people get married or settle down or whatever in their 40s versus 20. It's why some people come to things later in life than earlier in life. Well, everything has its own time, but there's still a structure and there's still a plan. And we just need to, how do we best align ourselves to that structure and plan? Well, we have our free will, but there's some things that we can't change. We cannot change the fact that Saturn's in Aquarius. We cannot change the fact that Pluto's in Capricorn. We couldn't change the intensity of the astrology last year. What we can do is choose to work with it. So I think, in summary, for you all, how do you work with the astrology of 2021? Meaning, in 2021, you have a foot in a new world, a new life that started to open up in 2018, 2019. But you have one foot in an old life. And like two ice flows, one's going this direction, one's going the other direction, you're going to start to feel the tension between two very different parts of your life, or two directions, or old versus the new. And how do you resolve that? Do you jump? Do you build a bridge between these two spaces? Do you know what I mean? Like, so that's why when we were looking at each of the signs and what these two areas that you might feel conflict isn't bad. Think of it as the tension, the necessary tension for you to make change, like the necessary changes. So for me, 2018, when I'm still in my day job and I'm not comfortable, but I'm well paid and well taken care of. I'm not making any big leaps, but in a very short period of time, my boss got fired. Two of my colleagues got fired. I got restructured. I'd been there for 11 years and they liked me. So I think that's why I didn't get fired. They put me in a new department, and the old me was like, yeah, I guess we'll do this now. And then the universe was like, oh no, she's getting too comfortable. So the person that they hired to be my supervisor, wonderful person, but it was just, there was tension. And the tension was because I wasn't being honest with myself. I was trying to be in a position that wasn't my position. I was trying to be in a life that was my life. And there was this moment where a light bulb went off. It was like it was the fall of 2018. I remember thinking, God forbid I get hit by the subway car the next day, that if I got to the other side and God was like, you literally found the thing that you were supposed to do, the thing that gives you passion, that is your purpose in life, and what happened? Were you too afraid? So I knew at that moment that when the light bulb went off, that also the clock was ticking, because every moment that I stayed out of fear was a moment that I went against myself. Every moment that I valued money over who I really was a day that I sold myself. So that's just a personal lesson I had to learn. And so come to the start of 2019, I finally, it was the scariest thing I ever had to do, like told my boss that it was going to be my last day. By the time all the HR stuff had worked out and they paid out my vacation days, because I used to have 30 days of vacation. Nobody in America has 30 days of vacation. My last day was in March of 2019. When did Uranus go back into Taurus? March 6th, 2019. So that was my seed of new life. So I want you all to go back and look at whatever seed was in your life. And it's the area that was in the slide that where I mentioned for each sign what was opening up. Okay, well, in 2021, this now has to come into form in some way. And if you're having a hard time making it come into form, you have to fix that. That's just what the astrology is happening right now. Unless there's any other questions, we've gone 2 hours, a little bit more than 90 minutes, but it's a lot to cover. But thank you so much. I see some familiar faces. I see some clients. I really enjoy having spent time with you and share the astrology. If you're watching this on the replay and you have a burning question, of course, you can email me empoweringastrology@gmail.com. And thank you all for joining me. I'll see you for a future webinar. I'll see you on my Facebook Lives. I do weekly Facebook Lives on Mondays. You can watch the replay on YouTube, IGTV, or listen on Spotify. Be well, take care. Bye.